Hi, this is Jack Downs with a brief run-through of the SVG images, presentation, and exercise. So SVGs stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. Unlike our other image file types, our normal web types, JPEGs, PNGs, GIFs, which are made up of pixels, SVGs are made up of shapes and paths. It's really the instructions for how to draw them. They are illustration-like images written in text. Think of logos. In other words, you're not going to do a regular photograph with an SVG. It needs to have big blocks of color and line and so on, and not the kind of minute gradations that a normal photograph has. Therefore, because they're written as text, they can be resized without loss in quality. And this is the big thing about SVGs. They require less data or file size than bitmap images. Because they're text, they integrate well with HTML because they can be written right into the HTML, and you can style them with CSS. SVGs can be animated also, and you could add the interactivity to them with JavaScript. So they are a truly unique kind of web format. Here's how SVG with the code might look like. Okay, so first we have code which essentially says we are using SVG code now and describes the size of the area where we're using it in. And then it says make a rectangle with this width and height, fill it with purple. It's giving some edges, some borders, some edges. And then it says this text in this fill with this font family with this size, and it says what do you type? You see we have open close text. Oops, sorry, let's go back again. An open text and a closed text, although some things like the SVG and the rect elements are, and they're written as elements, see, are actually what we call replacement elements, or they're simply one-part elements. And then we close the SVG. So we open the SVG and we close the SVG. So you can kind of get a feeling just looking at the code what it might look like, and this is what it looks like. Rounded edges, purple, yellow text, and the word. There are a number of ways that we can embed or link SVGs. Each has advantages and disadvantages. The two simplest ways are to embed with a regular IMG element where the SVG code has been saved into a separate file. So we could do an IMG, and then we would have the SRC again, and we would just name it there. And we could do all text if we wished, just a regular IMG, and this would actually be the path. In this case, test.svg would work if it was sitting right there. Otherwise, you have to go into a folder, /folders, // whatever, to go up and down. Or we can simply paste the code directly into HTML. Some people you could write simple SVGs by hand, actually like the same way we write HTML and CSS by hand using a simple text editor like Notepad++, especially if it was a simple one and if you're really familiar with it. But most people use drawing tools to do their SVGs. They essentially draw the shape and have a program interpret that into and then write the code out from it. Illustrator, which is a very common and accessible vector drawing tool, SVG vector, get it, is a fully featured art program that you can do amazing things with. But it doesn't create great SVGs for the web. It creates, it's not really optimized for the web, and the code that it creates, the SVG that it would spit out, is enormous and really cumbersome. You probably would not use that to make SVGs for the web. You'd probably use a program like Inkscape, which is there's other free or low-cost SVG image editors out there that are really just made for making SVGs for the web. And there's more and more programs all the time. So if you just search for free SVG editor, and there's a learning curve, you practice with it, you draw shapes, and then it will kick out the code. You can just use the code either of a number of ways to embed it. You can read more about the ways we can use the code, where we can put it, and advantages and disadvantages in your textbook. There's a lot more you can learn about it in the text, as I say, and then there's lots of other books being written about SVG, and you can also go to www.JOU317 to learn more about it too. Okay, so let's go ahead with the exercise. Okay, here I am with the you're familiar with this bistro file we've used over and over again. This time we're going to focus on the image itself, and it's a very simple version of this bistro file. This is in a zip folder, which I've asked you to download and to unzip in one way or another. Follow those instructions, and you should now have that file open in Notepad++. And when you run it for the first time, it looks like this. And you're familiar with this. And we have this little cute little goose up here. Black goose up here. So what would happen, and this is right now is just a regular IMG. Let's take a look and see what it is. It's a PNG actually, regular PNG in a regular IMG. What would happen if we made that a lot bigger? Well, let's go ahead and use add width and height attributes. Any place in here in the IMG is fine. I'm going to put it right here at the end. Width equals quotation marks, height equals quotation marks, and let's make it 500, which is bigger, a lot bigger than it really should be. This is the sort of thing you would not want to do with PNGs, for instance, and this is the reason why when we run it, it's gotten enormous and it's beginning to get a little fuzzy. And if we made 1,000, some ridiculously huge number, it was going to be even fuzzier. And the reason is that regular bitmap image types, PNGs, JPEGs, and so on, they just have a certain amount of size in them, a certain amount of resolution. And if you make it bigger than that, then they lose their resolution. On the other hand, though, what if we do the same sort of thing with an SVG? So let's go get an SVG. And I've given you one in your folder, and it's called Black Goose Logo SVG. Let's edit this. Wow, look at that. It's amazing. This is the kind of code that an SVG kicks out. Some of it is easy to understand, and some of it is essentially just drawing codes. Go to this place, this place, this place, draw this path, fill this path, and so on in different ways. That little black goose with all that design around it is a little more complicated than the simple shape we saw in the presentation. I want you to just select this whole thing and copy it. Go back to the Black Goose SVG, Black Goose HTML, and let's replace this entire IMG with it. Just to make it make more sense and easier to do, I'm going to make some spaces here. So I'm going to delete this IMG and save it in there. And the other thing I want to do is I want to add a width and height to this. That's the thing. SVGs by their nature don't automatically have a width and height. So let's give it a width and height. We'll do it right at the beginning after the SVG. Whoops, I keep doing that. Equals quotation marks, height equals quotation marks. Okay, here we go. Let's make that, let's do 200 and 200, which I think is the size it was before. And let's save it and run it. There it is. It looks identical. It is, in a way, it's the same size and it's still nice and crisp, just like it was before as a PNG. So what's the big deal? Well, here's the big deal, of course. The big deal is if we did make these a ridiculous number like a 500 or 1,000, let's make it a really ridiculous number, 1,000. If your browser isn't big enough to hold 1,000 pixel wide, then you won't see it. It won't be visible necessarily. But just make it 500 would be fine too. Or whatever number you wish. It's enormous, and it's exactly perfectly crisp. So SVGs can be blown up to a huge size, and there's no loss in resolution. That's the point of it. Now, because that's way too big, I'm going to return it back to 200 and want you to do the same thing. Let's do something else with this. Because it's we can see the code and the color code in here, you can actually go in and just play with and kind of like hack an SVG and just try different things. You could change numbers. One easy thing to change is the colors, right? So let's look at this circle fill, this first one. What if we change that to blue? Save it and run it. Now we get the blue around there, and of course we could change other colors and see what they're doing, and both learn about the SVG and what the different numbers were meaning, and also make actual changes that you might want to make for an edit. So we can leave it like that for now. Now we're going to add social media icons as IMG links. So these are SVGs, but now we're going to do them as links, not as directly pasted into the HTML, which is another method of getting an SVG onto the page. So let's go ahead and try this. We're going to go down into the HTML and the paragraph near the bottom. Here it is right here in this area which I'm calling footer. I'll scroll it up for you so you can see it a little better. And we're going to add some IMG SRCs. And these are things that I have in a folder in here. You have also in the icons folder, and here they are right here in case you want to go take a look at them. Here's some SVGs. You can also open them up and edit them if you wish and see what the code is like on them. So I'm going to type these in, and I'll be right back in just a minute with them typed in. And here we are with them typed in. And you can see I use icon / and what happens when I run it. And I did do alt text, which would be a nice thing to do. There they are. They're right down there, and they're awfully big. So what are we going to do? Let's make them smaller and center them. So to do that, we're going to do a couple things to the footer. And let's maybe make a little border and stuff like that. So let's go on up to our footer area. Here we are. Let's go ahead and say border top 1px solid. Now let's do a color hashtag 57B1DC and text align center. This is a bit of a cheat kind of, or I don't know. This isn't text, of course. These are images in here. The text align command really is made for text. But we can use it in a couple other ways. And once in a while, especially because plain old centering is a little hard to do, we can use it for something like just a couple images if they're sitting there like that. And then we'll say padding top 1em. And let's tell the little images themselves. So this is footer IMG, a descendant selector, to have a width and a height. So now we're doing the width and the height in CSS as opposed to doing it in HTML, which we could have done too. 40px. And we'll give them a little margin. 0, top bottom, and 0.5 em. There. See what happens. There they are, nice and small, a little spacing around them, a little spacing above them. And I stick this this little color border up there on top too. We've got the little bit of text there, which has now been centered at the same time. That's nice. So all this stuff is nicely centered. Yes, you could, on the other hand, put the container just around. You could center the paragraph, please visit, as text with a text align, and then you could put a little container just around those IMGs, and you could use flexbox, justify content, center, display flex, justify content, center, and those would center nicely. You could even do a little bit of space around or something. I would just do center and then do margins and stuff, which would be another way to handle that. Okay, so there we go. That's the run through SVGs, 2 different ways to use them, how we size them, and so on.